All of a sudden, there's renewed interest in 38 Studios, and it's about time. The ebb and flow of this story has, you know, depending on your interest and your perspective and your job responsibility, meaning as a journalist or a commentator or whatever, or state representative hiding under a rock somewhere, hoping no one ever asks you a question about it again. It's been, you know, kind of like this. And there's a long valley of malaise, I think, that's come along with the follow-up. And what I've always said is the need for a full court press and accountability and possibly prosecution in the 38 Studios debacle. And until that time, and until that process flushes out, we're never going to get over it. Good evening, the Dan York State of Mind version this evening. Thanks for watching. We're going to forego the rundown this evening because Tim White is in the house, who needs no introduction, of course. And I'm going to bring Tim on to kind of bring us up to date as to where we've been with this whole thing. I think he's recovered from glazed over eyes. Here's the full page that you can see at WPRI.com, and it really is, you're going to spend some time on this page clicking through and coming back, because all that the Target 12 et al. Folks have been doing on 38 Studios is there. And I just want to start with the governor's comment about all of this.
You know, frequently when someone comes forth with a new idea, say, oh, well, we can't do that because of 38 Studios. Oh, that's another 38 Studios. We can't do that.
Unless and until we figure out what happened and hold those accountable for it, put a signature on it, and put it to bed properly, Governor, you can't just say we can't do that.
Right.
It's always been my perspective that you can't wish this thing away.
Yeah, and
by the way, welcome, buddy.
It's good to see you.
Good to have you.
You know, she's empowered to change that, right? She had pledged on the campaign trail to launch an independent investigation, and not only is she empowered, the legislative branch is empowered. So we often hear a lot of this griping, oh, we've got this 38 Studios hangover. Well, if you had done the investigations, I think one could argue if you had done the investigations and it had come to a conclusion, as you said, someone's signature was on the piece of paper, maybe we would have been able to move on at this point. But the General Assembly has not done that investigation. I mean, there was the Oversight Committee, but it had no subpoena power, so there wasn't a lot of meat on the bone there. And that the governor has not launched an independent investigation yet. So we've been relying on this release of court documents from the lawsuit.
We tend to get into this stuff in the middle of the sandwich because we're so familiar with it. And what my fear is that there are a lot of people watching tonight that still really don't understand this case.
Sure.
So backtracking, let's talk about process, and then we'll start talking about the latest developments, and then we'll start guessing as to what comes next in 3 parts of the show tonight. So once upon a time, a guy by the name of Curt Schilling had a business called 38 Studios. It's a multi-online gaming business, you know, video games and stuff. There he is, the famous, or infamous, as the case may be. And well, you take it from here.
So we had
do a concise job of this.
Yeah, I'll try to give the elevator pitch of 38 Studios. Yeah. So they were hard pressed for capital, and they were in Maynard, Massachusetts at the time. And ultimately, in 2010, they moved their operations to Providence, Rhode Island, lured here with the promise of a $75 million loan. They had to meet certain expectations in terms of hiring at 38 Studios, and they were pretty lofty expectations, and that affected their bottom line, as we know in the end. 2012, let's fast forward 2 years later, they are absolutely hemorrhaging money. And the company collapses. They file for bankruptcy ultimately in June 2011. The state, under then Governor Lincoln Chafee, sues architects of the deal. So Curt Schilling, 3 other executives, a total of 14 defendants in the case, including the financial folks that handled it. Keith Stokes, then the head of the EDC, they sue the architects of the deal.
Economic Development Corporation, which is the finance agency involved in this.
That's right. So when the General Assembly authorized a loan guarantee program to go from $50 million to $125 million, it was the EDC that funneled the $75 million to 38 Studios. Anyway, all the players are sued by Max Wistow, who is the attorney for the state, representing the state in this case.
All right, so that is as good a broad brush as you can get, but there are gaps in the broad brush
Yeah.
because there's just so much that went on with this story. The idea that Curt Schilling, let's go backwards on Tim's thoughts there, that Curt Schilling was looking for $75 million or thought he was getting it. The sad part for Curt, and part of where the nexus of problem here seems to me is that he really only received $48 million.
$49 million.
$49 million of the 75 because this was so poorly set up and so poorly financed that it was so highly leveraged that the bond sale that allowed for the proceeds to be accumulated to then give to Curt Schilling. Follow this. The legislature created a loan guarantee program which had failed twice at $50 million. Like, hey, let's loan some businesses some money to get economics going here. And we'll guarantee it like a cosign on your daughter's car loan. Okay, that's where roughly, that's where the state is. Okay. No. Now it comes in at $50 million with a $75 million amendment, and bang, it's 125. So what they said no to at 50 twice became yes at 125.
Right.
He is in the pipeline. The legislature, by and large, to the person, other than the leadership, maybe 2 or 3 guys say we didn't know who was in the pipeline, correct?
Right.
That's the story.
That's
anyway.
the story at that time, which, and we don't want to jump ahead here, I'm gathering, but the narrative has since changed.
Right, okay. But the thing is that he didn't get all his money, and he's still angry about that,
Yep.
he says. But he also was promised money from another venue, it seems to me, that the tax brokerage aspect of this is what is looming out there as another finance option that was never consummated for him.
I think it was $10 million in tax credits a company was seeking as it was sinking in the spring of 2012, and Chafee wasn't having any of that. Dan, I'm not so sure, based on what I've been reading, that would have helped so much. What Curt Schilling...
Oh, you mean the business plan?
Yes.
No, I think they were sunk anyway.
Right. Well,
but he had an expectation he was going to get more than the 49 net out of $75 million.
What he claims is if they had gotten the $10 million, there was an angel investor waiting in the wings that would have pumped more capital into his company, and he blames Lincoln Chafee for sinking the ship.
All right, so it's hard to keep track of all this. Long story short, the company went bust. Everyone now understands that it was really I don't even know what word to put on it, a bogus legislative process that created the opportunity for this mess. Do you agree?
I do agree. Based on the information that we've been reading through in the court documents that were released last week, that members of the General Assembly had far more knowledge than they ever let on before, specifically House Speaker Gordon Fox and his hand-picked House Finance Chairman Stephen Constantino. The narrative before all this was Governor Carcieri, former Governor Don Carcieri, was the genesis of all of it. He stumbled upon, he went to a fundraiser at Curt Schilling's house in Medfield, Massachusetts. They had a nice meet and greet, some cocktails were flowing, hey, you should think about Rhode Island. Now we know that a board member of 38 Studios and a powerful Providence attorney who was close with Gordon Fox were meeting the year before. They may have had dinner together. They were certainly meeting at the State House because Bill Murphy, former House Speaker Bill Murphy, William Murphy, in a deposition admitted he stumbled into Gordon Fox's then Majority Leader office, and there's Thomas Zaccagnino, the board member I mentioned, Michael Corso, the lawyer, and they're in there. And Gordon Fox, hey, you need to meet this guy. You know, you should go tour 38 Studios, and former Speaker Murphy admitted he did. So the narrative has completely changed, and I think this is where people feel, you know, that the wool was pulled over their eyes.
Well, it's interesting that you say the narrative has changed. It hasn't changed for me. It's only your good journalistic work that has proven the narrative that I've been talking about the entire time, that Don Carcieri was blind dated into this situation. Now, does he have a responsibility as the chair of the EDC? You bet.
Oh yeah, he championed it as soon as it was in his lap.
But but what we need to know is what the motives were and what the proof of the motive is. The motives are, and what transactional business occurred or could have occurred from a successful operation for the people that had this in mind from the get-go. And why in heaven's name would these guys, Fox and Constantino, literally pull a stealth move in the legislature to get this loan guarantee program passed? Because I think you probably would agree that if Curt Schilling's $75 million program had been fully debated as part of the loan guarantee, that it would have been a Playhouse 90. It would have been a war in there on giving one individual or one company $75 million.
Yeah, the debate would have been a lot more robust, to say the least.
Who knows how it would have turned out?
Yeah.
My guess is it wouldn't have cut it, but at least it would have given everybody a chance to fully vet, argue, and debate the legitimacy of the business model.
Yeah.
And the public never saw that until the loan guarantee program was established and the EDC said, hey, we're doing this, and there was no place for the public to wedge in and go, wait a second.
But you're only as good as the information that you're given, and I think this is the point that the plaintiff in the case of the lawsuit, so Max Wistow representing the EDC at this point, their whole argument is it is actually the EDC. That's all interesting to them, but it's not central to their case, the politics of it. What's central to their case is the EDC board approved the $75 million, all but one voted for it. Right. Don Carcieri, the chairman, is not a voting member unless there's a tie, so he never voted on it. Their argument is they voted for it because information was withheld at just how bad a business model 38 Studios had. And if they had known the full picture, that the board never, ever would have passed that. So if you want to put that discussion into the context of the General Assembly, I think you could also say the public wouldn't have had the full scope of what
well, that's fair, but just in concept, the number 75 against 125.
Well, it wouldn't have been just Bob Watson voting against it, right?
Correct.
I think I can go out on a limb and say that.
And since you brought up the intricacy of the lawsuit's mission, one of the other ironies in this is that the EDC ends up suing its own executives.
Yes.
As part of this whole thing, as if the executive staff misled the board into this whole thing.
So you're talking about Keith Stokes, who's the executive director. You're also talking about Robert Stolzman, who was the attorney for the board at the time. They are defendants. They have since settled as part of this lawsuit. Now, and I always found it interesting that Keith Stokes was sued in the first place. I don't know how you feel about that, but he is in essence an extension of government, isn't he?
Well, there was a judge's ruling that it was allowable, but I will tell you the precedent of a state government agency suing one of its executives as opposed to just popping them for incompetence is a scary thought for anybody that they want to hire in coming into the future. And I don't
That's true.
I don't think we
Why
see
take that job?
I don't think we see a lot of talent. I'm going to pause here and come back to you. So what are we going to do to find out the truth? Well, this guy got some good answers last week from what I think is a pretty thick-headed Speaker of the House. My thoughts. Stay with us.
Nobody was aware of Curt Schilling or 38 Studios until afterwards.
The $75 million evaporated within 2 years when the company closed, forcing Rhode Island taxpayers to pick up the bill. Two people who have not been questioned under oath on 38 Studios are the company's founder and former Red Sox pitcher Curt Schilling.
Yes, we should hear from him. It's outrageous that we haven't.
And Senate President Teresa Paiva-Weed.
Did the Senate do enough to go through this legislation before passing it?
You know, when you look back in the rearview mirror, certainly I wish we'd put the same kind of condition that we put in this year's budget, limited a project. However, that would be really looking in the rearview mirror.
Some more good work by Target 12 and Eyewitness News. That was Perry Russom. You guys working in coordination, trying to chase down. Now, what do the leadership think now that these civil documents, these depositions have been released to the public? And he finally says, yeah, we should hear from him. What we don't know yet is whether he's going to call for full subpoena process hearings. What are you hearing latest?
Yeah, that's the big question, and I do think there's a bit of irony when the Speaker says he should be subpoenaed. Great, you have the power to do that. The House Speaker can authorize the House Oversight Committee to issue subpoenas as part of this case and try and compel someone to testify. So the ball's in his court. The latest on that, to answer your question, is the quote, I believe, from Larry Berman, who is the spokesperson for Nicholas Mattiello, was we're going to take this one step at a time. So they have not committed to issuing any subpoenas for the House Oversight Committee, but they are going to look at the documents and they're going to hold hearings, is what they say.
Well, look, he offered bones to Representative McGrath, who chaired oversight hearings on 38 Studios, which is nothing more than Macbeth. When I say McGrath, Macbeth, Karen Macbeth from Cumberland, and it was just a paper pushing process for the most part. This time around, it's more paper to push because the depositions actually go to the meat of what people are saying about, the process.
And the speaker said to Perry then, do I feel lied to? Yeah, I guess if information was withheld, I was lied to.
Well, I mean, do you have any insight as to why all of a sudden he's showing some kind of a hint of emotional, visceral reaction to being duped? What I've never understood.
Because it was never on paper, right? I mean, everyone speculated that it was driven by the legislature, but for them, for the democratically controlled General Assembly, it was the big bad Republican governor that was the genesis of this project. It's not the case anymore, Dan. It is now the Democratic majority leader who was turned Speaker of the House, Gordon Fox, that was involved far earlier on. So now they have, or he has, the ability to say, I was duped.
And the other guy who was the navigator of the legislation, the House Finance Chairman Stephen Constantino, a state representative out of Providence, who is now working in a bureaucracy in the Vermont state government, the health commissioner. And he puts a statement out after your good work on Friday and this weekend, you know, peeling away all these documents, and Stephen Constantino's 150, I don't remember, during depositions. But he's saying what? I didn't know nothing about nothing. My superiors told me to run this thing through.
Superiors. He doesn't.
What superiors?
Well, obviously,
Gordon Fox.
Gordon Fox. So in context here, we have the documents credit Stephen Constantino when he was House Finance Chairman with the concept of the now infamous $75 million.
The depositions.
The depositions do. A memo does. Let's be specific. He was asked about it, and he says, yeah, I knew that 38 Studios wanted $75 million. So in other words, he's credited with expanding, as we talked in the first segment, the loan program from $50 to $125 million. This is very important because in the past, that flies in the face of what has been said in the past, particularly from lawmakers, obviously. His statement was, I had nothing to do with them with bringing them here. Okay, that's probably true. His statement is, I had nothing to do with them after they collapsed, and we just authorized this loan guarantee program. He didn't answer a darn thing about the $75 million. That's the question. And I have repeatedly asked for an interview from Vermont government, state government, where he now works, and shocking, it's been met with silence.
He sent a statement through a Vermont paid spokesman.
Yes, he did.
That's pretty dumb. I don't
see why that's Vermont state business.
Correct. I mean, not that that's crucial to the story, but it just kind of shows you about the way the thinking process happens here. How in heaven's name does Stephen Constantino expect anybody to believe that he wasn't in some kind of defined cahoots with Gordon Fox to put this legislation from failed 50 twice mode to $125 million, not being aware of what was going on with Curt Schilling? And how does he live knowing that he was on the floor debating the concepts about help to all Rhode Island businesses, while the motive for this whole thing clearly was to transact that project?
Well, I think the hint is in that statement, and you said it. He was acting on the orders of his superiors. But that's why we got to talk to him. I mean, he can easily put it on the guy in federal prison, can't he? And he's starting to do that now. But that's why it's critical that we have an opportunity to ask him those questions.
But we also need to know, and people start to roll on each other under the heat, if at all, who got what for doing this? That's an important end answer for everybody.
Well, we know a couple people, don't we? So Gordon Fox's friend, Michael Corso, Providence attorney, stood to get 5% of the $75 million, which is $3.75 million. We know he was paid at least $2 million out of that, so he got some of that money. And then you even hear Dan McGowan did a great report in Walt Buteau on Thomas Zaccanino, the attorney, excuse me,
board member.
Robert Stolzman, the attorney, had his in-laws' property was being considered to have 38 studios.
In other words,
moved
everyone seemed to be looking for a little piece of the benefit of the process. That transaction never occurred.
It never
according to
occurred.
the
We
story.
should say that, right?
But so we need to, and we need to know we know what dough they got. Was there any other intent and all of that coming down?
We turn to the
here?
state police for that, don't we?
Yeah. When we come back, we'll talk about the Attorney General. There's a rumor we have one. Stay with us. There he is, Peter Kilmartin, our esteemed Attorney General. Tim, with his objective professionalism, will not engage this conversation. I've said enough about him on radio, on WPRO noon to 3, and here on my own editorial time to choke a horse. But I am aghast over his continued lack of understanding about what his role should not be in this 38 Studios potential state investigation. We'll come back to him in a second. Tim, you know that the state police have confirmed that they are now reading all the documents that you were reading, correct?
They have members of the Financial Crimes Unit, which has been handling an ongoing investigation from the beginning, poring over those documents as we have. And I think, Dan, what they're looking for is any mismatch from what folks they've interviewed told them and then what it says in the lawsuit. And if there's a difference there, they're going to try and exploit that and check it out.
The Attorney General has never believed that he should recuse himself from this case.
Still continues to say that.
He was on the leadership team prior to the 38 Studios deal coming down. He had just resigned from leadership, but not from the legislature, getting ready for his Attorney General run. He voted on the loan guarantee program, and I don't care if he's a dirty bird or clean as a whistle, the appearance issue and the confidence issue for the voters and the people of this state needs to be clear in my mind. Get out of it. Bring somebody else in, or promise to do so if what the state police generate bears a prosecutorial result.
Well, and I think the end game will be what fruit does it bear, and that's going to weigh heavily on folks' opinion on that. Ted Nesi, my colleague, interviewed him on Tuesday, and he continued with that he won't step down and recuse himself, and he points to the Attorney General's involvement in the federal case against House Speaker Gordon Fox, against prosecuting a police chief in North Providence as areas of public corruption that he's gone after and that he's proven he can do it. So there's no reason to recuse himself.
Last time I checked, Gordon Fox is in a federal pen, not a
that
state pen.
That was a federal case. Obviously, there was one aspect where the Attorney General's office helped out in the bribery charge because statute of limitation. We're going down another rabbit hole, but that was their involvement.
Give me 30 seconds. Where do you think we're going next? What's the next thing?
Well, who knows what the documents will bear as we keep going forward. But
You're not done reading yet, right?
No, we're not. And I think what we need to look at is where the civil case is and are the big pockets, the big money pockets going to settle on this. First Southwest, Wells Fargo, those are the defendants that have not settled yet. And I think we should look for an important ruling from the judge. I don't know when it's going to come out. Never want to predict what a judge is going to do, whether the case with them is going to move forward or not. And that might have an impact on any settlement. Maybe.
I wish there was a summary. It's an ongoing thing. And great work. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. So you go back to the top of the show, and excuse me, when Gina Raimondo's commentary about how we have to get past this 38 Studios thing, think of all the conversation I just had with Tim White and all the questions that are unanswered based on some of the questions that have been answered. Finally, I think the public is putting pressure on the legislature to put pressure on the leadership to do the right thing and really give us a formidable political enema, if not a legal one. So keep up the good work. We'll see you on the radio at noon tomorrow on WPR. I'm back here tomorrow night.